When our HOA president, Karen, slapped us with absurd fines for parking in our own driveway, she had no clue my dad was the banker in charge of their $1 million loan approval. Ever wonder what happens when a power-hungry HOA picks the wrong family to mess with? I stood frozen, staring at the bright pink notice wedged under my windshield wiper, my stomach sinking like a rock. 150 fine, driveway violation. The bold black letters felt like a slap in the face. Our own driveway. The night before, my sister Jenny's graduation party had run late, and a few family members had parked outside. It never crossed my mind that something as simple as parking at our own home could lead to a fine. "Dad!" I shouted, storming back inside, clutching the notice. "You need to see this!" My father, Thomas Reynolds, looked up from his coffee, his brow furrowing as he took the paper from my hands. As a senior loan officer at First National Bank, he spent his days analyzing financial agreements and enforcing regulations, but even he looked baffled by the violation. "This makes no sense," he muttered, scanning the fine print. "They're citing Section 7.3 of the Pinecrest HOA guidelines, but this isn't even a real infraction." His eyes darkened, and that's when I knew Karen had just made a very expensive mistake. The air in the community hall was a tinderbox, thick with unspoken resentment. Our newly elected HOA president, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, stood at the podium, a smug, self-satisfied smirk plastered on her face. She surveyed the packed room of Pineview Gardens homeowners. "And so," she beamed, "after considerable effort by your dedicated board, I'm thrilled to announce that the Pineview Gardens Community Enrichment Loan of $1.2 million is on the cusp of approval. This will fund our magnificent new clubhouse and pool complex." A smattering of hesitant, uncertain applause. Most eyes, however, were darting towards my dad, sitting quietly in the third row. That's when he stood. You could hear a pin drop. Dad, a man of 50, usually the picture of calm composure, a senior banker who dealt in facts and figures, not drama. "Actually, Karen," he said, his voice clear and firm. Her smile faltered, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Reynolds? If you have a question, perhaps after the presentation?" "It's not a question, Karen," Dad stated. "It's a statement. As the senior loan officer at First National Bank currently reviewing that very application," a collective gasp swept through the room. Her face went pale. He continued steadily, "I have to say, we've encountered some rather alarming irregularities in the HOA's financial submissions. Starting with, for instance, the phantom $150,000 you're claiming in reserve funds that, according to your own bank statements, simply don't exist." Her smirk completely vanished. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror, darted around the room, then fixed on Dad. That was the moment she knew she'd messed with the wrong family, the moment her carefully constructed little empire began to crumble. I, early 20s, was grabbing a coffee. My sister, 17, was still buzzing from her graduation party the night before. "Morning, Dad. Epic party, huh? Aunt Carol's car is still out front, and Uncle Jim's," I said. Dad looked up from his newspaper, a slight frown. "Morning, Mike. Yes, a good turnout. Just make sure they're moved by noon. We don't want any issues." That was Dad. Always cautious. Too late. I'd gone out to get the paper and found them. 3 bright pink violation notices tucked under the windshield wipers of our family cars, parked neatly in our own driveway. "Dad!" I exclaimed, rushing back in, notices in hand. "You are not going to believe this. We've been fined for parking in our own driveway." Mom, early 50s, sharp, a legal secretary, entered, tying her robe. "Fined? For what? We had family over." Dad took the slips, his brow furrowing. "Pineview Gardens HOA driveway violation, Section 4, subsection B, maximum 2 vehicles permitted in residential driveway overnight. Fine, $75 per vehicle. This is new." New, Mom retorted. It's outrageous. Karen Matthews. It has to be her. She got elected president last month and has been on a tear ever since. Dad reached for the phone. I'll call the HOA office. There must be a misunderstanding. He put the phone on speaker. After a few rings, a crisp, overly cheerful voice answered. Pineview Gardens HOA, Karen Matthews speaking. How can I make your day brighter? Karen, this is Thomas Reynolds at 112 Willow Creek, Dad began. We received 3 parking violations this morning for vehicles in our driveway. They belong to family staying over for our daughter's graduation. Her tone instantly cooler. Ah, Mr. Reynolds, yes, I personally noted the violation during my morning community review. Section 4, subsection B, very clear, 3 vehicles, 3 fines, that'll be $225. But it was a special occasion, Dad reasoned. Surely there's some leeway for guests. A saccharine laugh came through the speaker. Rules are rules, Mr. Reynolds. If we make exceptions for one, we have to make them for all. And then where would our property values be? Looking like a used car lot, I imagine. Payment is due within 10 days to avoid further penalties. Have a wonderful day. Click. Dad stared at the phone, a muscle twitching in his jaw. That woman, Mom fumed. Community review? She was snooping. This is insane, I said. What are we going to do? Dad took a deep breath, the banker in him taking over. We'll pay it for now, but I'm going to read every single line of these HOA bylaws. Every single line. Dad, usually so unflappable, looked out the window towards her perfectly manicured lawn across the street. A glint of determination, something I rarely saw, entered his eyes. She wants to play by the rules, he muttered, more to himself than to us. Fine, let's play. The pink slips became a regular feature. Our mailbox was a harbinger of doom. 1 for grass height, exceeds 3.5 inches by 0.25 inches. Fine, $50. 1 for Chloe's small decorative wind chime, excessive noise potential. Fine, $40. 1 for the garden hose not being coiled in a regulation figure 8. Fine, $30. Mom spread the fines on the coffee table. This is harassment, Thomas. She's targeting us. The Simpsons next door have a veritable jungle and not a peep. Our elderly neighbor rang the doorbell, looking distraught. Thomas, Susan, Mike, so sorry to bother you. But, Karen, she's ordered me to remove the small bench my late Mary loved. Says it's not on the approved exterior decor list. 30 years that bench has been there. More neighbors chimed in over the next few days. Mrs. Davis was fined because her poodle, Fifi, barked excessively when the mailman came, a single woof their HOA president had apparently witnessed. The Garcias were told their kid's basketball hoop, a neighborhood fixture, had to go. Dad sat quietly at his laptop. She's consolidating power, making examples. What are you looking at, Dad? I asked. HOA financials, meeting minutes, public record, he replied. Interesting patterns. Expenditures are up significantly since she took over. Vague vendor names. Can you do anything? Mom asked. From the bank? Not directly, Dad explained. My role at First National is commercial loans, large scale. An HOA like ours wouldn't typically cross my desk unless... He trailed off, a thoughtful expression on his face. Unless what? I prompted. Unless they were planning something big, he mused. A major capital improvement project, for instance. Something that would require significant financing. He looked back at his screen, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. A week later, the HOA newsletter arrived. Front page headline, Exciting News. Board approves initial plans for grand new clubhouse and pool complex. Funding applications in progress. I looked at Dad. He was already dialing a number on his work phone, his expression unreadable. Janet, it's Thomas Reynolds. Could you pull the preliminary inquiry file for a Pineview Gardens Homeowners Association? Yes, a potential loan application. I'd like to see who's been assigned lead on that if it's come in. He listened, then a slow, deliberate nod. I see. Thank you. He hung up and looked at us. Well, isn't that interesting? Mom poured coffee. So? What's interesting, Thomas? Don't leave us in suspense. Dad took a sip, a rare twinkle in his eye. Pineview Gardens HOA has indeed submitted a preliminary application for a $1.2 million loan to First National Bank. Your bank? Seriously? I asked, astounded. And due to a recent internal restructuring and a colleague being on extended leave, Dad continued, guess who's just been assigned as the senior reviewing officer for that application? Mom and I stared at him, speechless. A slow grin spread across Dad's face. You? Mom exclaimed. Oh, this is poetic justice. Dad held up a hand, ever the professional. Now, this doesn't mean I can arbitrarily deny it. I have a fiduciary duty to the bank. All procedures must be followed to the letter. Due diligence will be exceptionally thorough. So, Karen has no idea she's essentially handing her financial records directly to the guy whose family she's been terrorizing? I clarified. Precisely, Dad confirmed. She'll just know First National is reviewing it. Not specifically me unless she digs very deep into our departmental roster. The fines, however, didn't stop. If anything, their HOA president doubled down. She saw me washing my car one Saturday. Michael, dear, she called from her driveway, voice dripping with false sweetness. So good to see you taking pride in your vehicle. Just a friendly reminder, runoff containing soap suds into the storm drains is a finable offense. Section 12, subsection C, wouldn't want you to get another one of those nasty pink slips. She winked and sauntered off. The audacity was breathtaking. Later that week, Dad came home from work, a thick binder labeled Pineview Gardens HOA, loan application FN 78034, under his arm. He sat at the dining table, opened it, and began to read. Hours passed. Finally, he let out a low whistle. Well, he murmured, tapping a page with his pen. Section 3. Declared liquid assets. Karen Matthews, president, has signed off on this, attesting to its accuracy. He looked up at us. Based on what I've seen in their publicly available quarterly statements versus what's claimed here, there are some discrepancies. Significant ones. Dad's home office became a command center. Spreadsheets, bank statements, the HOAs obtained through official channels as part of the loan review, and meeting minutes covered his desk. On the phone, Dad used his professional banker voice. Yes, mister. Albright, in reviewing the Pineview application, I've noted several areas requiring further clarification. Specifically, the reconciliation between stated reserve funds and actual bank balances. Also, the supporting documentation for Community Enhancement Project Phase 1 expenditures seems incomplete. An independent third-party audit might be prudent before we proceed. Standard procedure for an application with this many red flags. Mom whispered to me. Red flags. He's enjoying this, just a little. Can you blame him? I whispered back. We started noticing their HOA president watching our house more. Cars would drive by slowly at night. One morning, our newspaper was shredded on the lawn. Petty but unnerving. I did my own recon. I noticed her best friend, another board member, had a new, very expensive landscaping crew redoing her entire yard. The same crew whose invoices to the HOA, Dad had noted, were unusually high and lacked itemized details. I showed Dad photos on my phone. Dad, look. Martinez Landscaping. Isn't that the company with those questionable invoices? They're doing Diane's entire yard. Wonder who's paying for that. Dad nodded slowly. Interesting observation, Mike. Very interesting. Document everything. The pressure was clearly getting to their HOA president. She cornered Mom at the grocery store. Susan, darling, I do hope Thomas isn't finding our little HOA's loan application too taxing. We're all so eager to get started on the new clubhouse. It would be such a shame if any bureaucratic hitches held things up, especially with all those Unfortunate violation notices your family seems to accumulate. Perhaps if the loan process goes smoothly, some of those could be reevaluated. Mom relayed the conversation, incensed. She practically offered a bribe. Reevaluate our fines if Dad fast-tracks the loan. Dad's face was grim. She just made another critical error. Attempting to influence a loan officer is a serious matter. Dad picked up his phone. Security and compliance, please. Thomas Reynolds calling. He spent the next hour on the phone. When he hung up, he looked at us. First National's internal audit department is now officially involved. Due to the irregularities I've uncovered, and now this attempt at undue influence, they're launching a full forensic audit of Pineview's financials going back 3 years. This is no longer just about my review. It's out of my hands in that respect. The bank itself is digging. The mood was electric. Word of the bank's intensified scrutiny had leaked, though no one knew the full extent or Dad's specific role. The meeting was packed. Their HOA president stood at the podium trying to project confidence, but the strain was visible. This is where we came in, the scene from the beginning. She beamed falsely. I'm thrilled to announce that the Pineview Gardens Community Enrichment Loan of $1.2 million is on the cusp of approval. Hesitant applause. Dad stood. Actually, Karen, as the senior loan officer at First National Bank currently reviewing that very application, we've encountered some rather alarming irregularities. Starting with, for instance, the phantom $150,000 you're claiming in reserve funds that, according to your own bank statements, simply don't exist. She stammered. That's a clerical error. Easily explained. Mr. Reynolds, you're clearly biased due to the numerous citations your family has received for failing to adhere to community standards. Dad was unfazed. The citations began after I was assigned this loan review, Karen, and they escalated after I started asking pertinent questions about the HOA's finances. Furthermore, the bank's forensic audit team has uncovered a pattern of unreceipted expenses, payments to non-existent vendors, and what appears to be a systematic inflation of projected income on this loan application. Murmurs turned into outraged shouts. Mr. Henderson stood up, his voice trembling with anger. She told me my bench was an eyesore while she was funneling our money to who knows where. Another neighbor cried out, and my Fifi's excessive barking fine? Was that funding your shopping sprees, Karen? Their HOA president banged her gavel, her face a mask of fury and panic. This is an outrage. Lies. This meeting is adjourned. The room went silent as my father's words sank in, their weight pressing down on the crowd like a heavy fog. The heated arguments, the accusations, all of it suddenly felt trivial in comparison to the revelation he had just delivered. For a moment, Karen Matthews seemed to shrink in on herself, her once unshakable confidence crumbling in the face of undeniable truth. First National Bank has, as of this afternoon, officially denied the Pineview Gardens HOA loan application due to material misrepresentations and evidence of financial mismanagement. Dad continued, his voice steady but filled with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew the battle had been won. A full report will be delivered to the interim board once elected. His gaze turned pointedly toward Karen, and for a brief moment I could see the terror flicker behind her otherwise composed exterior. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for a way out, but there was no escape now. The mask she had worn for so long had finally slipped, and the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. The room erupted again, but this time it wasn't the angry shouts of her supporters. No. This was the collective outpouring of years of frustration, the murmurs of disbelief from those who had been too afraid to speak up, the quiet triumph of the ones who had been waiting for this moment. It was as if a weight had been lifted off the community's shoulders, the suffocating grip of her corruption suddenly gone. Karen's face, once a picture of smug confidence, now crumpled with the weight of her defeat. She stood there, motionless for a few seconds, her eyes wide as the reality of her situation began to sink in. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. She didn't have anything left to say. There was nothing left to deny. The evidence was too strong, and her empire was collapsing around her. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed to get caught in her throat. The once dominant figure who had ruled over Pineview Gardens with an iron fist, manipulating the board and bullying anyone who opposed her, was now reduced to a shadow of herself. She was exposed, and everyone saw her for what she truly was: a fraud, a liar, a woman who had used her position to manipulate and deceive for personal gain. The fallout was swift, inevitable, and brutal. Karen Matthews and her entire board were forced to resign in the wake of the scandal. The once unified group she had led was now divided, and those who had once stood by her were left scrambling to distance themselves from the wreckage she had created. The truth, no matter how much she tried to deny it, had caught up with her. All the ridiculous fines levied against us, and many other families, were immediately voided by the new board. I looked out at our street, peaceful for the first time in months. It's quiet. No pink slips, no Karen glaring from her window. Mom smiled. Your father certainly knows how to conduct a thorough review. Dad entered carrying a small, unassuming bird feeder. Thought Mrs. Wilson might like this. The old board said hers was non-compliant. He winked. That was his quiet way of celebrating. He hadn't sought revenge. He'd simply insisted on integrity and fairness, using his professional skills to protect not just our family, but our entire community. The moral reward wasn't just about the dropped fines or her downfall. It was seeing our neighborhood breathe again. People started talking to each other, the fear replaced by a sense of shared victory and relief. The Garcia's basketball hoop went back up. Kids played freely. One evening, Mr. Henderson and several other neighbors stopped by. Thomas, Susan, Mike, we just wanted to say thank you. You folks had the courage to stand up when the rest of us were too intimidated. You saved our community from that woman. And Thomas, that bank of yours, they don't mess around. Dad just smiled modestly. Just doing my job, Henderson, both as a banker and as a resident of Pineview Gardens. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly. As they left, I looked at Dad. He hadn't sought accolades, but he'd earned the respect of an entire neighborhood. We could finally park in our own driveway without looking over our shoulders, and that, more than anything, felt like winning. The power-hungry HOA president had messed with the wrong family, and in the end, the rules, the real rules of fairness and honesty, had prevailed.